Hey, howdy folks, Zach Elliott at Feel Free to Argue. And I wanted to do a response video to my friend Coffeedude here. He presented some interesting ideas in a video that he did recently called Complacency. I'll link to that up in the bar. And basically said that the problem is not so much complacency as a strong polarization. And I would tend to agree with this to a certain extent. Well, actually to a large extent, because I think the choices that we're offered by the media are often false choices. And there is a lot of polarization going on around Obama. Probably because people are very worried because of the nature of the economy and the deteriorating war in Afghanistan. And people have a lot of fair concerns about what's going on, and that, I think, makes it a situation that is rife for polarization. So people feel like they either have to kind of mindlessly support Obama no matter what he does, or they have to join up with the Glenn Beck crowd and say that Obama is going to be the end of civilization as we know it. And I think the truth is much more subtle than that. Though I've been highly critical of Obama, and I'm going to continue to be, especially in this vid, because I think that people who apologize for Obama, I think are not even being, honest with themselves about what he's doing, or they're misinformed, which I think is also, completely possible depending on what news sources you look at. It's hard to be informed in this country because there's just so much BS, especially in the mainstream media. But I mean, if you look, I think, objectively at what Obama has been doing, you can see a couple of trends. I mean, I view the selection of Geithner and his whole plan for the economy, essentially, aside from certain elements of the stimulus package, I view it as being very, very weak and very much kowtowing to Wall Street. It seems like the essential assumption is that Wall Street knows what it's doing, and that if we just reinflate this bubble, that, everything will be okay. And does not acknowledge any of the real systemic problems that are there. And I mean, I think your choice of Geithner makes that a virtual inevitability. Him and Summers, the people who are advising Obama on economic issues, are not friends of the common man. They're friends of big business, and that's going to be their tact. I get concerned when a Nobel Prize winner in economics calls the idea that we have selected the zombie idea, simply because it's the idea that refuses to die. And I really agree in most respects with Paul Krugman's analysis, and certainly with Stiglitz and a lot of other people. I mean, Geithner has very few friends, very few people who think what he is trying is actually going to work. Well, it's going to work. It's going to shield people on Wall Street from the consequences of their shitty decisions. But aside from that, it's not going to do much else. It's certainly not going to save the economy. You look also at Afghanistan, which is now fully and completely Obama's war. And you can see a huge escalation in this. One of his most recent choices, once again, very, very poor choice. Sending the wrong messages, showing, I think, a true capitulation in his original strategy. Because, I mean, the original person that was there before this new McChrystal guy was someone who said that as a NATO commander, my responsibility, my authority stops at the Pakistani border. That unless I am defending myself, or my troops are defending themselves from actions initiated within Pakistan, that I have no authority to go into that country. And the new person is someone who has total contempt for any kind of regional barriers. I mean, there's a reason why when Obama chose McChrystal to head up the Afghan operation, that Cheney was giving Obama a big thumbs up and saying, he couldn't imagine anybody better to handle this. And it's because McChrystal was running Cheney's secret assassination unit. And he was also running one of the worst prisons in Iraq, Nama, where several people were prosecuted. Of course, not him, even though he was the commanding officer there. But, this is part of our grand tradition of, sheltering higher-ups in the chain of command from the consequences of their decision and trying to push it all off on a few bad apples at the bottom of the barrel. Instead of saying that this was an institutional policy that came all the way from Rumsfeld, Cheney, probably even Bush, and prosecuting up the chain of command, which we're clearly, Obama is showing that he is refusing to do. And it has to do with his foot dragging, in terms of fighting all of these attempts to try to, bring these people to justice. Just this last week, they said that they were going to continue to fight a court order to release some of those photos. That it's just a constant foot dragging by this administration that's attempting to cover up the crimes of the previous administration, therefore making them fully complicit with them. Now, talking a little bit more about Afghanistan and Obama's escalation of what is now clearly his war. I mean, I was just reading something from Tom Engelhardt of the Tom Dispatch, talking about 6 ways in which the Afghanistan war has been escalated. The expanding troop commitment, which I thought, interestingly, we said there was going to be both a military and a civilian surge, but we had a little bit of trouble finding civilians to do the civilian part of it, so it's really going to be all military now. The expanding CIA drone war, the expanding now Air Force drone war. Air Force has got their own drones, and they're doing the drone attacks now as well. And these drone attacks, by the way, are really viewed as being entirely cowardly by the subjects of them. They just look at us fighting with these unmanned drones as being completely cowardly. And I think they have a point. I mean, they're saying that we don't have the stomach for a real fight. And I think we're using these unmanned drones because we as a society are unwilling to accept the casualties necessary to do this in a more precise way. Even though we call this precision bombing, it's hardly precise when we kill 50 civilians for every one insurgent that we kill. Expanding political interference, I thought this was interesting too, talking about how we're trying to get some sort of executive in the Afghan government, totally kind of extra-constitutional, who would manage the Afghan government instead of the increasingly embarrassing Hamid Karzai, who is not liking the expansion of the war in his country, because it's making his job harder. The expanding war in Pakistan, number 5, and the expanding civilian death toll and the blowback from that. And these are all kind of significant escalations. They've all taken place on Obama's watch, and he's responsible for them. And more importantly, I think it's going to get all of us into trouble, because you remember where the last attacks came from. It was from the people who were trained in this area. I mean, the actual terrorists came from Saudi Arabia, our good friend. But all of these things, I think, represent dangerous steps in the wrong direction. I mean, the steps on the economy are wrong. The steps in the military are wrong. He's getting in super deep. Now, I don't think, I'm not saying that this is representative of the NWO or anything like that, but what I am saying is that the same people are calling the shots. The big financial institutions and the military-industrial complex. If you look at healthcare, it's clearly still, the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies that are calling the shots. The same people are in charge. We've switched out figureheads, but the key things that are going wrong with the country are continuing to go wrong. And most of the things that Obama has done so far, I think, have been cosmetically nice, but if you look at it on a more substantive level, I'm not impressed. And I think if most of the people who supported Obama looked at what they really wanted to get out of him, and then looked at what he's done, the people he's selected, and the decisions that they're likely to make, I think they would be as disappointed as I am. But, as always, you can feel free to argue.